What is separation in the context of non-duality? And when does division cause pain and suffering? I'm Russ Rapp, and I wanted to talk about the idea of separation as it relates to non-duality. Because when we talk about non-duality, we use words, and they always fall short. We use phrases like, the world is an illusion, or what you perceive is unreal, and so it could be confusing. And even the idea of separation itself is confusing in the term of non-duality, because when you think of separation as an illusion, because it's dualistic, then we take that as a concept and we start to believe that any sort of perceived separation is a bad thing. And that's not always true, because boundaries, borders can be a good thing. In relationships or with your children, having proper healthy boundaries is a way to have good relationships. And even from a personal standpoint, if you think of the cells in your body having cell walls, having a border, a boundary, that's a good thing, because if it didn't have the boundary, all of your cytoplasm and your mitochondria and nucleus would all just splatter and we'd just be blobs on the floor. And so to think that when you talk about non-duality and consider separation as a bad thing, or that it's unnatural, then you can start to believe things that are not really beneficial for you in your own life. And from a personal standpoint, we have, when you talk about the world as being an illusion, who's believing that it's an illusion? It's the separate self, or the ego, the persona, and that creates another duality between the false self and the true authentic self. And so that becomes another non-duality. And when you talk about non-duality, the basic way to understanding it is that it means not two. And so anytime you see duality, it's just another way that you can understand that I should question what I'm believing. And from a personal standpoint, we have structures within ourselves, in our psyche, that separate off. And so we have a conscious and subconscious, ego, superego, id, however you want to describe it. There's functions within ourselves that are separate, and there's reasons for that. But when we have issues, when we have stress, when we have suffering, that's when we cut ourselves off from the natural flow of things. Because as humans, we are alive, we are animated, we are in motion. And so anytime that we separate parts of ourselves, we create a shadow self or an other. That's not me. I don't act like that. I'm not like this kind of person. This is who I am. We define ourselves, and when we become rigid with that, we have problems, because the flow that is the animating aspect of life becomes stunted or becomes blocked. We have blockages, and so if you think about it as like a polarity, as a battery, a positive and negative, we are that flow, we are that energy that flows through us. And so when you have blockages of belief, if you will, that's when you encounter problems in your own life. And when it comes to interpersonal relationships, if we divide ourselves off from other people, if we see them as other, that can also cause problems in our life. And when you think about separation is a way to take power away from the individual. And individualism isn't necessarily a bad thing, because when you talk about me as an individual, in a non-duality framework, we talk about how that's not real. But the idea of being an individual is a progression from the idea of living in a tribal sense, tribalism, where you don't have an individual identity, you don't have a way to show your uniqueness, And so individualism is actually a positive thing in the sense that, we have a greater perspective. We can understand that sacrificing the individual for the group isn't necessarily a good thing. And as we grow, as we develop as human beings, if you look at the aspect of how power works in a society, if you want to take power away from the collective, if you want to be your own king of the kingdom, if you will, or if you want to be a dictator or someone that takes away the power of others, there's a process to that. And if you look at the Hegelian dialectic, you have a synthesis, you have a hypothesis and antithesis, and then through that creates a synthesis. So you create dualism in order to create another whole. And so as we develop as human beings, that's a natural thing of differentiating ourselves and then integrating those parts that have come before into the next phase of human development. But that same structure can be used to take power away from the group of people. And so anytime you want to consolidate power, you separate people into groups, you separate into identities, or this is who I am, or this is what I belong to, and you create a sense of struggle or conflict in those two groups, and you as the individual that wants to consolidate power will offer this solution. And as we continue to develop as human beings, that antithesis to the hypothesis is always deeper, always larger, and so the consolidation of power is ever increasing. And that's what individualism is a deeper sense of the idea of tribalism, because we understand ourselves on a deeper level. And I hope I'm not confusing things too much here, but I think especially in the world where there seems to be a lot of division, people are divided amongst their ideologies or their race, their gender, religion, all of those things that can divide us. That in a sense gives our power away, and instead of trying to connect on a human level or to see our similarities and understand the essence of all things, if you go from a sense of division, of a sense of separation, then that creates problems. And from a sense of freedom, the more we can get along, we can understand each other, the more we can have an appreciation for ideas outside of ours, the less we need power structures to be able to tell us how to live our lives, or to so when you think of situations historically or currently where there's a power structure that is acting on a group of people, the dualism is that it's not only that the people that want control want to take power away from the collective group of people, it's that people are willing to give that up. And so that in itself is a dualism. And the reason why I bring that up is because we talk about, you can't really directly talk about non-duality, but you can talk about duality and understand non-duality through that lens. And so, one thing I remember when I was doing A Course in Miracles, it's been a while, but one of the activities that the book has you do is to look at everything around you, whether externally, internally, and say, I'm not that tree, I'm not that grass, I'm not that sidewalk, I'm not that phone. And look at things externally and say, I'm not that. And that goes for the same way for internal processes, like I'm not this emotion, I'm not this thought, I'm not this breathing, I'm not this body. And instead of being bound to it, you just say it casually, and what ends up happening is you start to understand the truth of non-duality. Because if I were to say, well, non-duality means oneness, or that you're connected to all things, that just becomes another concept. And so what the process of saying that I'm not that, I'm not this, it helps you to relieve yourself from this idea that you are somehow separate from that. And so you start to understand what non-duality is through negation. And so instead of me telling you what non-duality is, you understand the trick of the mind. And so that's where non-duality provides benefit, because it, in a sense, because it's that openness, it's that ability to question your beliefs, to question when you see things in a dualistic sense, and it's that emptiness that you can draw from to really see things from a different perspective. Because if you hold on to the idea that you are separate or that you are dualistic, then that's when pain and suffering comes about. And in a sense, we as humans, we have abstract thinking, we can see things in different ways, but really it doesn't matter whether you're a human being or an animal, because from a consciousness perspective, the pain is what we're aware of as human beings, and if we don't see that, if we don't question that, then it just becomes an aspect of existence. But the fact that we question that and we can see things historically or instinctually, that's when pain and suffering can be an issue. And so non-duality essentially is pointing to that duality and saying, maybe there's another way. So hopefully all this made sense in preparation for this video. You know, I had a way that I wanted to present it, and so I'd love to hear your comments, questions. If I can clarify kind of some of the things I talked about in this video, that really helps me understand what the issues that you're running into, and so I can maybe be a little clearer as to what non-duality is. And so separation isn't good or bad, it just is. We see it as a dualistic individual, but the emptiness, the infinity is within all things at all times. So, and until next time, peace.